I'm here today with our guest, the host of the Duran, Alex Christoforou, and Alexander Mercouris is with us. And of course, they're experts on things that are happening in Ukraine, and which makes them better than every journalist in America. So let me bring them in, and just because Michael Tracy tweeted this out today. And he says, so the United States is engineering the war effort of a client state, now bombing targets 400 miles inside Russia, confirmed via the usual tactic of oblique cheeky acknowledgement from top Ukraine officials. Definitely an escalation. This is what the U.S. has signed on to. So what he's talking about here is this is the Ukraine official who tweeted out, the Earth is round, discovery made by Galileo. Astronomy was not studied in Kremlin, giving preference to court astrologers. If it was, they would know if something is launched into other countries' airspace, sooner or later, unknown flying objects will return to departure point. What? So, and then they tweet out this. So they're talking about, so let me bring in Alex and Alexander. So is he talking about Ukraine has now found a way to bomb Russia 400 miles inside Russian territory? Is that what he's saying?
That's exactly what he's saying, and that's what's happened. And it's quite a worrying development. It's a very worrying development, because what they've done is they've taken an old Soviet reconnaissance drone. This is one that was developed by the Soviet Union during the Cold War. It's jet-powered. It's got a long range, about 1,000 kilometers. They've converted it into a kind of cruise missile instead, and they've launched it at 2 Russian air bases. Now, bear in mind, these are bases used by Russia's strategic bomber force, so there are going to be nuclear weapons there. I mean, that's a fact which I've noticed the media in the West has not mentioned.
Wow. Oh, I didn't know that. Didn't even cross my mind that that's what's happening. So Michael says Biden has nominally pushed back on Ukraine demands for weaponry to strike deep inside of Russia, although who knows how substantial that pushback ever really was. Now it's almost irrelevant. Whatever the origin of these weapons, the United States is ultimately facilitating these attacks. And so these were explosions reports. So this is how far into Russia they're getting their missiles.
Saratov, yeah.
So that's
it's deep into Russia.
Ryazan and Saratov, or however you say that. So
yeah, it's deep into Russia. Yeah.
So this is a crazy escalation, is it not? If they're bombing a base that has nuclear weapons, go ahead.
No, the Russian Ministry of Defense, they came out and they said that their air defense did intercept these missiles, and much of the damage was from debris.
Okay.
Now, there's no way to confirm that. This is what the Russian Ministry of Defense said, and there were casualties. I believe 3 people died from this debris from these missiles. Of course, you know, who knows what the truth is. But the interesting part about this story, I think, is that this attack came at the same time that Victoria Nuland, the Underdeputy Secretary of State, the person who was in charge of the Maidan coup in 2014, was passing out the cookies at the Maidan. She was in Kiev for a day. She spent the day in Kiev with Zelensky, with his team, and now you have this strike. And it comes also at the same time where you're starting to hear from Macron in Germany talk about trying to find some sort of ceasefire, perhaps giving Russia some sort of security guarantees. And now you have this drone/missile attack, whatever you want to call it, deep inside Russian territory. So coincidence? Maybe, maybe not.
So just like when Boris Johnson went to visit Zelensky to get him to, in March, to not go, or in April, to not go along with the peace deal that they had with Russia and Ukraine. Now we have Victoria Nuland going there saying, hey, why don't you send these missiles a little deeper into Russia? That sounds crazy. Especially, well, here's what Michael Tracy says. He says it's worth recalling that between 1945 and 2022, the idea that the United States would be facilitating long-range bombing attacks deep inside Russia and on a base that houses part of Russia's nuclear forces would have been virtually unfathomable. Now we're told it's just normal. And he links to this story. It says Moscow says 3 killed in Ukrainian drone attacks on air bases deep inside Russia. The escalatory progression of the war has followed a very predictable pattern. For example, when Ukraine escalated by committing the terror bombing on the Crimea Bridge, Russia escalated in turn by launching massive airstrikes on Ukrainians' electric infrastructure and so on. That's when they decided to go after the infrastructure. Despite how easily identifiable this escalatory pattern is, it constantly gets obscured in a tsunami of propaganda. To simply note, U.S. Ukraine have committed escalatory acts is seen as morally depraved. So people are chronically confused, deceived about the reality of the situation. So that's a pattern that he's kind of picked up on. Would you agree on that pattern, that the United States is provoking these escalations?
Absolutely. I mean, I have to say I agree with what Alex said in this respect. I do not believe that Ukraine, which is completely dependent on the United States, would have launched an attack on 2 such important, such sensitive Russian air bases without having a green light given to it, but at least someone with authority in the United States. I'm not saying the president himself was directly involved, or the Pentagon, but I would not be surprised personally, given her background, if Victoria Nuland said, if you do it, we'll give you the political cover you need. And it is normalizing this pattern of escalation, because every time that this is done, the pressure on Putin in Russia is to do more. And people don't like to admit the fact that he is under pressure in Russia to do more, and that Russia has a public opinion that, asks, why is this happening? Why are you letting it happen? Why aren't you doing it more? And of course, he will do more in response to this. And it's a very, very dangerous thing. I mean, sending missiles to an air base where there are nuclear weapons it's beyond reckless. If you think about it, it's beyond reckless to shell a nuclear power station, but that's happening as well. And sooner or later, something is going to happen, or one fears that something is going to happen, which is going to be much more dangerous and much more frightening than anything we've seen.
So how would you sum up where the war is right now?
No. Well, the thing that's happened is that, of course, the United States poured weapons into Ukraine over the course of the summer. That enabled Ukraine to regain ground. It meant that the war was prolonged. It meant that thousands of people, perhaps some say tens of thousands of people, mostly Ukrainians, have died, and it has provoked the Russian escalation. So the Russians are now building up their forces, they're building fortifications, they're sending tanks, all kinds of machines to Ukraine. They're going to be outnumbering the Ukrainian army fairly soon, and all the indications are that they're planning to grind, as they say themselves. This is what the Russian overall commander in the area, a man called Surovikin, has said, that they're planning to grind Ukraine's military down. So they're going to do it slowly, bit by bit. They're going to dismantle its army and grind down its economy. Now that, and we have to be, never forget this, that means people are dying. And, both Alex and I, who follow this war closely, we're seeing everyday pictures, film of what that means from Ukraine, people dying in the most horrible ways, in cold trenches, like in the First World War, under the weight of Russian artillery. It is terrible, and it's getting worse every day, and Ukraine is bleeding gradually away. And that's something also which we should be trying, I think, logically to try to stop.
Yeah, the United States, Jimmy, has they've come to the decision that they're not going to get a quick regime change like they started out with way back in March, April. The plan was, let's put as many sanctions as we can on Russia. Let's try to get a regime change through an economic war of attrition. We'll overthrow the Putin government, and we'll end this thing quickly. We'll be in Moscow. We'll get all their resources. We'll split Russia apart. We'll balkanize it, and everything will go back to normal in a couple of months. the United States now, they have admitted that they are not going to get a regime change in Russia now. They've understood that. So I believe that the plan now is to try and manage the chaos. How can we manage this war, and how can we extend and prolong this war as long as it takes? That's what they're constantly saying. We're going to support Ukraine for as long as it takes. They don't tell us what that means. What does it mean as long as it takes? What exactly is this all about? How long is as long as it takes? They don't say that. They want to manage this conflict. They want to extend this conflict. And one of the reasons they want to extend this conflict and manage it is because business is good. Project Ukraine is good business. It's good for the military industrial complex. It's good for all the money washing via FTX and Sam Bankman-Fried and all of these characters. It's good for the black market arms dealers. We're getting reports that weapon now are funneling into Africa via Ukraine. This is a money-making business now, and it's going to be very difficult. There's been so much money that's been poured into Ukraine now. My fear is that it's going to be next to impossible to wind this war down, because now you have so many actors who are making so much money in so many different areas that you're not going to be able to pull back at this point.
Wow. Well, that's very depressing.
Jesus.
God damn it. I know it's, and you know, this was the stuff that people were afraid Trump was going to do. Reckless, crazy bullshit like this at the behest of corporations or who's ever paying him. And it turns out that's exactly what Joe Biden's doing and his regime. Well, listen, I really appreciate, you know, I've heard recently that Russia is ramping up 200,000 soldiers to, is that happening?
Absolutely. It is happening all the time. And of course, we're going to be in a situation where the war is going to get worse, because hundreds of thousands of Russian troops are joining it. Not just troops. As I said, they're sending tanks, machines, you name it, they're sending it. And of course, they're launching all these attacks on the energy system of Ukraine as well. So the war is going to escalate. It's going to get much worse. There's probably going to be a big Russian offensive some point over the next few months. Nobody quite knows when, and nobody quite knows what its objectives will be. And of course, the danger is the Russians do that. We try to do something in response. The Russians then do something else. Barack Obama, he gave an interview to The Atlantic way back in 2016. He said that in Ukraine, the Russians always have escalatory dominance. Those were his words, and he's right. But as Alex says, there is no real incentive at the moment on people who are in power and who are in a position to change this and move it back. There's no real incentive for them to turn it around, because, well, I don't want to repeat all the very depressing things which Alex did.
Yeah, and we haven't even talked about, Jimmy, that's the refugee crisis that's going to come about from Ukraine.
No.
I mean, that's going to be a huge catastrophe for the people of Ukraine, for Europe.
So
where are these people going to go if they're cold and they have no electricity, no water, no food?
Where are they going to go?
Europe.
Yeah.
Europe or Russia. Those are their only two options.
Yeah. Well, Alex Christoforou and Alexander Mercouris, I really the hosts of the Duran. Everybody should check out that show. I really appreciate you coming on. It's always a pleasure to talk to you.
Thank you, Jimmy.
It's a pleasure, and thanks for having us.
Pleasure to be here.
Okay, see you soon. Hey, we're doing live stand-up comedy in Los Angeles, December 9th, 16th, 23rd, and 30th. And we're going to be in Tempe, Milwaukee, Minneapolis, Nashville. Go to jimmydore.com for a link for all those tickets. See you there.